The Galactic Council had been around for 12,000 years, and it kept peace between 743 different alien species through talking, trade deals, and sometimes careful military actions when needed. Their ships were beautiful and elegant, made with both style and function in mind. The biggest council warship was called the Eternal Harmony, and it was 300 meters long. Everyone thought it was a perfect example of great engineering and power. When humans invented faster-than-light travel and asked to join the council, the leaders were cautiously hopeful. Humans seemed reasonable enough, even though they were a bit pushy during talks. Ambassador Helen Martinez represented Earth during the early meetings, and she showed that humans understood how important peaceful cooperation was between different species. However, the Council had one requirement that every new species had to follow before they could become full members. Each species needed to show their military power in a formal demonstration. This was an old tradition that went back thousands of years, and it was meant to keep everything transparent and stop any member from hiding weapons that might threaten the peace. Everyone worked so hard to maintain. Ambassador Martinez smiled when Council Chairman Vex Thora told her about this requirement. She agreed right away, maybe too quickly for the chairman's comfort. Within 3 standard weeks, humanity would send one of their military ships to the neutral demonstration zone near the Council's main station. Chairman Vex Thora belonged to a species called the Kalari. His people were known for being excellent diplomats, and they could read body language from hundreds of different alien species. He noticed something in Martinez's face during that meeting. It was not quite pride and not quite amusement, but it was something that made the small spines on his back tingle with worry. The day of the demonstration arrived with all the usual ceremony. 63 council members gathered in the observation deck of the station. It was a huge transparent dome that gave everyone a clear view of space in all directions. Each representative floated, sat, or hovered depending on what their species needed. They all talked excitedly about what humanity might bring to show them. Most of them expected something rough but functional. Humans were newcomers to space travel. They had only figured out how to go faster than light 40 years ago. Their technology would surely be basic compared to what the Council had. Maybe it would be similar to what the Kalari flew 3,000 years in the past. Admiral Greg Patterson stood quietly in the area, set aside for the human delegation. His uniform was neat and crisp, and his face showed no emotion. Next to him stood Captain Laura Bennett, who would be commanding the ship they brought for demonstration. Both of them wore dark blue uniforms that belonged to the United Earth Space Navy. Silver badges on their chests gleamed under the station's artificial lights. Council member Thrixol was a floating gas being from a species called the Nepheron. He drifted closer to where the humans stood. Through his translation device, his voice came out sounding like pleasant music. He asked Ambassador Martinez what kind of warship humanity would be showing today. Martinez smiled in a polite way and told him they were sending one of their newer designs. It was called the Titan class. The specific ship was named the UES Warhammer. Thrixol said it was a charming name, though his color shifted a bit, showing he was confused. He asked how big the Warhammer was. Captain Bennett answered this time, and her voice carried easily across the observation deck. Several nearby aliens turned to listen. She said the Warhammer was about 12 kilometers long and 2.4 kilometers wide at its widest part. The observation deck went completely silent. Chairman Vex Thora thought his translator must have broken. Surely, she said 1,200 meters. That would already be huge by council standards, but it would at least make sense. He asked Captain Bennett to repeat the size. Bennett said it again calmly. 12 kilometers long, 2.4 kilometers at the widest point. The total weight was about 800 million tons when it was fully loaded with everything it needed. The silence lasted even longer. Several species started doing quick math on their personal devices. The Eternal Harmony, which was the Council's pride and their biggest ship, would fit inside the human vessel with plenty of room left over. Before anyone could say anything in response, the space in front of the station began to shimmer and ripple. The station sensors detected FTL signatures and quiet alerts started chiming. A jump point was forming right there in front of them. What came out of that jump point made several species cry out in fear and distress. The UES Warhammer slid out of jump space, smooth as a knife cutting through silk. Its outer hull was a dull gray color that seemed to swallow light instead of reflecting it back. The ship's shape was harsh and angular with no curves or artistic touches anywhere. It looked exactly like what it was meant to be and nothing else. It was a weapon. Even though it was 50 kilometers away, which was supposed to be a safe distance, the Warhammer dominated everything they could see. Its huge size made the nearby council ships look like toys that children played with. The hull was covered with what could only be weapon placements. There were thousands of them, ranging from small, point defense systems to massive gun turrets that were bigger than most council frigates. Running along the spine of the ship from front to back was a structure that made all the council military experts go pale, or whatever their species did when extremely scared. It was a magnetic acceleration cannon. It was a railgun so big that it could theoretically punch a hole through a planet's outer crust and keep going deeper. Chairman Vexathora whispered something, and his translator barely caught the words. He said that was not a warship at all. That was a mobile fortress. Captain Bennett's face stayed neutral, but there might have been the tiniest hint of satisfaction in her eyes. She told them the Warhammer was actually one of their smaller Titan-class vessels. Humanity had 8 of them currently flying and protecting their space. They had 14 more being built in shipyards right now. 22 vessels total. 22 ships that could each probably destroy the entire council fleet without breaking a sweat or taking significant damage. The demonstration had not even started, yet and the Galactic Council was already rethinking everything they thought they knew about humanity. These were not weak newcomers asking for protection. These were something else entirely. These humans had built machines of war that made their greatest achievements look like ancient relics. The question now was what they would do with all that power. Captain Laura Bennett settled into the command chair on the bridge of the UES Warhammer. She felt the familiar shape of the seat adjust to fit her body perfectly. Around her, the bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. Each officer was focused on their station and doing their job with calm precision. Commander Ryan Hughes was at the tactical station. He announced that all stations reported ready for the demonstration. Bennett said very well and told him to open a communication channel to the council station. Hughes confirmed the channel was open. Bennett spoke clearly into the communication system. She identified herself as Captain Bennett of the UES Warhammer and said they were prepared to begin their demonstration. For safety purposes, she requested that all council vessels move to a minimum safe distance of 200 kilometers away from the demonstration. Cruiser. There was a pause before Chairman Vexathora's voice came through the speakers. He said their largest vessels normally operated safely at 50 kilometers during weapons demonstrations. Surely 200 kilometers was excessive and unnecessary. Bennett glanced at Hughes, who pulled up targeting solutions on his display screen. She told the chairman with respect that his vessels had never operated anywhere near weapons of this size and power. She strongly recommended that he follow their safety protocols exactly as stated. Another pause followed. Then the chairman said grudgingly that he understood, and all vessels were moving to 200 kilometers as requested. Bennett waited patiently while the council ships retreated to what they clearly thought was a ridiculous distance. When the last vessel cleared the safety boundary, she nodded to Hughes and told him to begin with the standard approach. She said they should not overwhelm their audience too quickly. Hughes confirmed and said he was activating targeting scanners. On the council station, every sensor suddenly lit up like fireworks. The Warhammer was painting targets across 1,000 cubic kilometers of space. Its scanning arrays worked with a precision that made council sensors look like ancient primitive technology by comparison. Hughes announced he was deploying target drones. From the Warhammer's launch bays, 24 drones shot out into space. Each drone was roughly the size of a council frigate. They had basic maneuvering thrusters and transponders. They spread out across the demonstration zone and established a complex 3-dimensional pattern in space. Hughes reported that targets were deployed and active. Bennett said very good. She told him to begin the point defense demonstration using manual targeting, only with no computer assistance. Hughes confirmed and said manual. Targeting was engaged on 640 turrets spread across the Warhammer's hull. Laser clusters activated and came online. The targeting was handled by human gunners. Each one was trained to track and eliminate incoming threats with speed and precision that came from years of practice. The drones began evasive maneuvers following their programming. They were designed to simulate attacking fighters. They turned sharply, rolled, and burned their engines hard in random directions. They moved at speeds that would challenge most Council point defense systems and cause real problems. The Warhammer's guns tracked them with ease. In 3.7 seconds, all 24 drones were reduced to expanding clouds of metal vapor and destroyed completely. The lasers had not missed a single shot. On the Council station, analyst Drevkin was frantically reviewing the sensor data. He said that level of performance was impossible. The reaction time and tracking precision would need quantum-level computing power or something equivalent. Ambassador Martinez stood quietly beside him and spoke. She said, or they just needed well-trained humans. She explained that humanity had excellent reflexes. Millions of years of evolution as persistence hunters gave them exceptional hand-eye coordination. Drevkin looked at her, then back at his screens in disbelief. He asked if she meant those guns were manually aimed by humans. Martinez confirmed that every single one was aimed by a human gunner. On the Warhammer's bridge, Bennett allowed herself a small smile. She said very good to her crew. Now she told Hughes to show the Council the secondary armament. She ordered him to prepare a missile demonstration. Hughes confirmed and said he was loading firing solution Delta 7 into the system. 30 more target drones deployed into space. These ones were larger and equipped with basic defensive countermeasures. They had flares, chaff, electronic jammers, and even small interceptor charges to defend themselves. Hughes announced missiles away. 16 missile tubes opened along the Warhammer's flanks. 32 missiles streaked into space with their engines burning brilliant white. But these were not simple dumb projectiles. Each missile had its own guidance system, maneuvering thrusters and target recognition software that could adapt. The drones deployed their countermeasures as programmed. Clouds of chaff filled space trying to confuse the missiles. Electronic jammers screamed across multiple frequencies. Interceptor charges detonated in carefully calculated patterns trying to destroy the incoming missiles. The missiles ignored everything. They wove through the chaff, like dancers moving to music. They ignored the jamming through frequency-hopping algorithms. They dodged the interceptor charges with contemptuous ease. When they reached their targets, the nuclear warheads did not even need to detonate. The kinetic impact alone was enough to vaporize each drone completely. 32 missiles launched. 30 targets destroyed. 0 misses. 2 missiles had been held in reserve and were not needed. Bennett said acceptable, as if this level of performance was completely routine. Now she told Hughes to demonstrate the primary armament. This time Drevkin noticed that the human delegation in the observation deck looked more tense than before. Admiral Patterson was watching the Warhammer with an expression that might have been pride or might have been concern. A single massive drone deployed into space. This one was the size of a Council destroyer. It was equipped with armor plating and shield generators. It was designed to survive multiple direct hits from conventional Council weapons and keep functioning. Hughes reported that the target was locked. Railgun Turret 7 had a firing solution ready. Bennett ordered one shot only. She told him to show the Council what physics could do to a target. Hughes confirmed and said he was firing in 3, 2, 1, and mark. The railgun turret fired with no visible flash or dramatic beam of light. There was only the faintest distortion in space as the tungsten depleted. Uranium slug accelerated to 3% of light speed. The drone's shields flared bright, blue as they absorbed a catastrophic amount of energy. Then they failed and collapsed. The slug punched through the armor plating like it was tissue paper. The kinetic energy transferred into the drone's structure. The drone did not explode in the traditional sense. It disintegrated. One moment it existed, and the next moment it was an expanding sphere of metal vapor and ionized particles. On the Council station, Chairman Vex Thora had to steady himself against a railing. He asked if anyone had calculated the energy involved in that single impact. Drevkin whispered that it was 4.2 exajoules. He said that was equivalent to a 1 megaton nuclear weapon. The chairman said from a single turret. Drevkin confirmed it was from a single turret, yes. And the Warhammer had 84 of those turrets. Vex's Thora did the math quickly in his head. If the Warhammer fired all its railguns at once in a full broadside, it would deliver more destructive energy than most species' entire nuclear arsenals combined. He asked nervously about the spinal weapon. Surely they would not demonstrate that massive cannon. On the Warhammer's bridge, Bennett was asking Hughes the exact same question. She asked if they had clearance for a spinal cannon test. Hughes said they did have clearance, but High Command strongly suggested keeping it at low power. Admiral Patterson's orders were quite specific about not terrifying their new friends into hostility. Bennett chuckled and said very well. She ordered minimal charge and a distant target. She told him to find an appropriate asteroid. Hughes scanned and reported he had a nickel-iron asteroid roughly 400 meters in diameter. Current distance was 70,000 kilometers away. Bennett said that would do perfectly. She ordered him to charge the cannon to only 5% capacity and fire when ready. The space along the Warhammer's spine began to shimmer with electromagnetic fields building power. Energy flooded into the magnetic acceleration coils. A projectile loaded into the breach. It was a solid slug of depleted uranium weighing 10,000 tons. Hughes announced he was firing. The asteroid existed in one moment. In the next moment, it did not exist anymore. The slug crossed 70,000 kilometers in approximately 4 seconds. When it struck the asteroid, the kinetic energy was so immense that the nickel iron simply vaporized. It turned from solid matter to superheated plasma in a tiny fraction of a second. Bennett said calmly that it was a good shot. She said that would conclude their demonstration. She ordered all systems to stand down from combat status. On the council station, nobody spoke for a very long time. They simply stared at where the asteroid used to be. The emergency session of the Galactic Council started 6 hours after the demonstration ended. All 743 member species sent representatives in the Grand Chamber was packed with beings of every shape and size imaginable. Chairman Vexithora called the session to order. His voice was amplified across the vast space so everyone could hear him clearly. He said they were gathered to discuss humanity's application for membership, specifically in light of the military capabilities they had demonstrated that afternoon. The floor was now open for comments from any member. Council member Zareth was first to speak. His tentacles coiled tightly around his speaker platform, showing his stress. He said with all due respect to the human delegation, he had to express his profound concern. What they witnessed today was not a defensive capability. It was a weapon of complete annihilation. The Titan-class warship could destroy entire civilizations with ease. How could they in good conscience allow such overwhelming power into their council? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber from many species. Ambassador Martinez rose from the human section. Her posture was calm, but her voice carried clearly across the chamber. She said Council Member Zareth raised a valid concern. Yes, the Titan class was extremely powerful. It was designed to be exactly that powerful, but power itself was not evil. What mattered was the intent behind how that power was used. Zareth said those were easy words to speak. He said history had shown that species with overwhelming military superiority inevitably used it against others. The Kellery learned this painful lesson during the third expansion. The Vorlith learned it during the Machine Wars. Power corrupts people, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Admiral Patterson stood beside Martinez. He said Council Member Zareth was right that humanity learned that exact lesson long before they ever reached the stars. Their history was written in blood and ash. They had fought wars that would make the Council's ancient conflicts look like minor skirmishes. They had unleashed weapons that poisoned their own world for generations. Humanity knew exactly what unchecked power could do to civilizations. Another voice called out from the chamber. It was Council Member Yixtar, who was a crystalline being. His thoughts came out as harmonic tones through a translator. He asked if humanity understood the danger. Then why did they build such terrible weapons? Patterson's expression became harder and more serious. He said because the alternative to having power was being vulnerable. Because predators existed in this universe and prey did not survive for very long. Because humanity would rather have the capability and never use it than need it desperately and not have it available. Analyst Drevkin stood up from his seat. His analytical mind had been processing the situation from every possible angle for hours. He said he had reviewed humanity's history extensively over the past 6 hours since the demonstration. Their species had been involved in continuous warfare for at least 5,000 years of recorded history. Their planet currently maintained enough nuclear weapons to make it uninhabitable multiple times over. They had developed biological weapons, chemical weapons, and antimatter weapons. How could the council trust that humans would not eventually turn these capabilities against council members? The chamber fell completely silent. Everyone waited for Patterson's response. Patterson said simply that they could not trust humanity based on faith alone. The chamber erupted in shocked sounds from dozens of different species. Patterson held up his hand asking for quiet. He said trust must be earned through actions over time. What the council could do was look at human behavior and judge them by their actions. Humanity had unified 30 years ago after a catastrophic war. Since that unification, they had not engaged in any aggressive military action against anyone. They had not tried to conquer other worlds. They had not enslaved anyone. They had built their civilization, grown stronger, and actively sought out peaceful contact with other species. Zareth pointed out that their peaceful behavior might simply be a consequence of isolation. They had not met anyone else to fight with yet. Martinez stepped forward. She said humanity made first contact with an alien species 8 years ago. A species called the Kryn found one of their colony ships in neutral space. The Kryn were not friendly at all. Chairman Vexathora's spines went completely rigid. He said the Kryn were not members of this council. They were pirates and raiders who existed on the fringes of civilized space. He asked what happened during that encounter. Martinez explained that the Kryn attempted to board the human colony ship by force. They wanted to take the 3,000 colonists as slaves. The colony ship was completely unarmed and defenseless. The chairman asked what happened next. Martinez said a human destroyer arrived within 6 hours of the distress call. It disabled the Kryn vessel with minimal force necessary. It rescued all the colonists safely. Then humanity did something the Kryn had apparently never experienced before in their long history of raiding. Humans repaired the damaged Kryn ship, gave them supplies, and released them with a clear warning not to attack human vessels again. The chamber was absolutely silent. Martinez continued speaking. She said 3 weeks later, the Kryn attacked another human ship. This time humanity's response was very different. A Titan-class battleship arrived at the scene. It destroyed the Kryn vessel in under 4 minutes. But what happened next was what really mattered to the council. Humanity tracked the Kryn back to their base, which was a massive station housing tens of thousands of their people, including civilians and families. Humans could have destroyed it easily. One shot from the spinal cannon would have been more than enough. Yixtar asked quietly if they destroyed the station. Martinez said no, they did not. Instead, humanity sent the Kryn a message. They told the Kryn that humanity would defend itself and would respond to aggression with overwhelming force. But they also said clearly that humans did not wage war on civilians. They gave the Kryn coordinates for establishing a communication channel. They offered them trade agreements and peace. Someone asked what the Kryn did in response. Martinez smiled slightly. She said the Kryn had not attacked a single human ship since that day. 3 months ago, they sent an ambassador to Earth. Humanity was currently negotiating a trade agreement with them. Council member Trixval had been silent until this moment. He floated forward slowly. He was a Nephiron elder and one of the oldest beings in the entire council. He had served for over 4 centuries. He asked Ambassador Martinez and Admiral Patterson a direct question. He said most species came before this council seeking protection, resources, and knowledge. Humanity sought none of these things, did they? Martinez replied that humanity would welcome knowledge exchange and trade opportunities. But no, they did not need protection from anyone. Trixval asked then why join the council at all. Patterson answered this time. He said because isolation was not the answer to anything. Humanity needed to be part of the galactic community. They needed to learn from other species and share what they knew. They needed to contribute to the greater good. Humanity believed that together, all the species combined could build something better than any of them could build alone. Zareth muttered that those were pretty words, but words were cheap and easy. Martinez said firmly then judge humanity by their actions instead of words. She said the council should grant them probationary membership. They could set conditions and establish oversight. Humanity would accept reasonable restrictions because they understood the council's concerns completely. But the council should not reject humanity out of fear. Fear led to isolation, and isolation led to ignorance. Neither side could afford that outcome. Chairman Vexathora looked around the chamber carefully. He was reading the mood of all the assembled representatives. Fear was definitely there, but so was curiosity. In some eyes he saw a glimmer of hope. The galaxy had been peaceful for so long that perhaps it had grown too comfortable and complacent. Vexthora announced they would vote on humanity's membership. But not today. This matter required very careful consideration. They would meet again in one standard week. Until then, the human delegation was welcome to remain on the station and speak with other species. Martinez bowed respectfully and thanked the chairman. She said they would use the time wisely. The week passed with surprising speed. The human delegation used their time extremely well. They met with dozens of different species and shared meals with them. They discussed philosophy, art, science, and culture. What the council members discovered was not the warlike monsters they feared. Instead, they found people who were flawed, complex, and genuinely fascinating. Captain Laura Bennett had dinner with a delegation of Curie engineers. She found herself in an enthusiastic discussion about fusion reactor efficiency that lasted for hours. Commander Ryan Hughes played a strategic board game with a group of Talixian military officers. He lost badly, which made everyone laugh and enjoy themselves. Ambassador Martinez attended a cultural exchange event where she shared human music. She was moved to tears by a beautiful Nepheron harmonic performance. Admiral Patterson spent most of his time with Chairman Vexthora and Analyst Drevkin. He answered their questions about human history with complete honesty. He did not try to hide the darker aspects of humanity's past. Instead, he explained carefully how those terrible experiences had shaped them, taught them hard lessons, and ultimately made them into who they were today. Patterson told them during one late-night conversation that humanity was not perfect. They probably would never be perfect. But they were trying every single day. Every day they tried to be better than they were yesterday. Drevkin asked if he could be very blunt with a difficult question. Patterson told him to please speak freely. Drevkin said the council feared humanity. That fear might drive them to do irrational things. If the council rejected their membership application, there was a real chance that fear would push them to attempt preemptive military action. Not because they believed humans were evil, but because they were afraid of what humanity could potentially do. Patterson considered this very carefully before responding. He said if the council made such an attempt, they would validate every fear they had about humanity. They would turn a peaceful species into an enemy. They would discover exactly how terrible humans could be when pushed into a corner and forced to fight. He asked if that was really the path the council wanted to take. Drevkin admitted it was not. But he said fear was not rational and could not be reasoned with easily. Patterson said then they needed to fight that fear together. He asked Drevkin to help them show the council that humanity was worthy of trust. Now a week later, the council met again for the final vote. Chairman Vexthora stood before the assembled representatives. He said they had deliberated and spoken extensively with the human delegation. Now they had to decide. The question was simple. Should humanity be granted membership in the Galactic Council? He opened the floor for final statements before the vote. To everyone's great surprise, Council member Zareth spoke first. He said he had been humanity's strongest critic the previous week. He had spoken about fear and danger, and he admitted he was not wrong about those concerns. Humanity was dangerous without question. But during the past week, he had come to understand something important. Every species in the Council was dangerous in their own way. The Kalari could poison entire worlds with their biological expertise. The Vorlith could crash planetary economies with their financial power. The Nepheron could manipulate atmospheres until planets became completely uninhabitable. Zareth paused and his tentacles uncurled slightly, showing he was calmer. He said they did not fear each other because they had built trust over time. That trust came from shared experiences and mutual respect. He believed humanity deserved the same opportunity to prove themselves. He voted yes for probationary membership. A surprised murmur ran through the entire chamber. Other species spoke next. Some were in favor of accepting humanity. Some remained against it. The debate was passionate but stayed respectful throughout. Finally, Chairman Vexthora called for the official vote. He said all in favor of granting humanity probationary membership in the Galactic Council should indicate their vote. Now lights appeared all across the chamber. Each light represented one species casting their vote. Green lights meant yes. Red lights meant no. Yellow lights meant abstaining from the vote. The voting system calculated the results instantly. Chairman Vexus Thora looked at the display screen and felt his spines relax for the first time in a week. He announced that by a vote of 612 in favor, 98 against, and 33 abstentions, humanity was granted probationary membership in the Galactic Council. The probation would last for 10 standard years. During that time, humanity would be expected to demonstrate their commitment to peaceful cooperation with all members. Ambassador Martinez stood with her expression showing barely controlled emotion. She said on behalf of all humanity she accepted these terms. Humanity would prove themselves worthy of the Council's trust. Vexus Thora continued speaking. He said there were specific conditions that came with probationary membership. Humanity would submit to regular inspections of their military facilities. They would participate fully in Council peacekeeping operations whenever required. They would agree to limit construction of Titan-class warships to current levels during the entire probationary period. Admiral Patterson nodded in agreement. He said humanity had no intention of expanding the Titan-class fleet unless circumstances absolutely required it for defense. Vexus Thora said then it was officially settled. He struck the ceremonial chime. Its pure tone rang through the chamber. He said welcome to the Galactic Council and expressed hope that this would be the beginning of a long and prosperous partnership. The chamber erupted in polite applause from species who had hands and similar gestures of approval from those who did not. Analyst. Drevkin approached the human delegation one final time. He congratulated them on achieving what they came for. Martinez smiled warmly and thanked him. She said she hoped they could prove his support was well-placed and justified. Drevkin said he hoped so as well, but he admitted he remained curious about one specific thing. Martinez asked what that was. Drevkin gestured toward the viewing port where the Warhammer was preparing to depart. He said Martinez had mentioned humanity had 8 Titan-class warships currently in service with 14 more under construction. Once the probationary period ended in 10 years, did they intend to continue building more of them? Admiral Patterson followed his gaze to the massive vessel floating in space. He said that depended entirely on how the galaxy behaved. If the Council provided the security and stability they promised, then no. Humanity would have no need for more Warhammers or ships like them. Drevkin asked what would happen if the Council did not provide that security. Patterson's expression became harder. He said then humanity would build as many as necessary to protect their people. They meant exactly what they said. Humanity would never allow themselves to be vulnerable again to any threat. Drevkin nodded slowly, showing he understood. He said he hoped humanity never needed to build another one. Patterson said quietly that he hoped for the same thing. The human delegation departed the station and headed back to the Warhammer on a shuttle. Captain Bennett joined Admiral Patterson at the shuttle's viewing port as they traveled. Bennett said that went better than she expected. Patterson chuckled. He said he saw the faces of council members during the demonstration. He thought half of them were going to faint from shock. Bennett admitted they might have been slightly heavy-handed with the spinal cannon shot. Patterson said perhaps they were. But the council needed to understand exactly what they were dealing with. Respect was built on honest communication. Bennett said apparently it was also built on fear. Patterson shook his head. He said not fear, but respect. There was an important difference between them. Fear would have driven the council to reject humanity. Respect convinced them to give humanity a real chance. Bennett asked if he thought they would make it through the probationary period without any incidents. Patterson said that depended on whether the galaxy stayed peaceful. But if trouble came, at least now humanity had allies, and those allies had humanity to help protect them. The shuttle docked with the Warhammer. The massive ship prepared to jump back to human-controlled space. As it entered jump space, the vessel vanished from Council sensors. It left only the memory of what it represented. It was humanity's promise, humanity's power, and humanity's hope for a peaceful future among the stars. In the Council chamber, Chairman Vexus Thora stood alone looking at the empty space where the Warhammer had been moments before. He whispered to himself, asking what they had done. Analyst Drevkin's voice came from behind him. He said they did what they had to do. They chose hope over fear. Now they had to trust that they made the right choice. Vex Thora asked what would happen if they had not made the right choice. Drevkin was silent for a long moment. He said, "Then may whatever gods existed have mercy on them all, because humanity certainly would not show mercy to those who threatened them." Vexithora said that was a grim thought. Drevkin agreed, but said it was an honest one. He told the chairman to come along. They had much work to do. If humanity was going to succeed during probation, they would need guidance and support. He intended to make sure they received it. It was better to have humanity as friends than as enemies. Vexithora agreed those were very wise words. The two left the chamber together. Council military analyst Drevkin had worked for 230 years reviewing fleet compositions, weapon systems, and battle plans from hundreds of different species. He thought of himself as someone who could not be shocked. He was a professional who could look at any military power with cold objective thinking and give an honest assessment. Now he stood staring at the UES Warhammer and felt something he had not experienced in over a century. It was genuine fear. Drevkin asked Captain Bennett if she would be willing to give them detailed information about the ship for their records. His mandibles were clicking rapidly, which showed he was very agitated. Bennett said of course and produced a small data chip. She handed it to a nearby assistant who quickly connected it to the Council's computer systems. Within just a few moments, the information appeared on every analyst's screen throughout the observation deck. The specifications were completely insane. The power generation system used 4 fusion reactors. Each one could generate enough energy to power a medium-sized city for years. Backup systems included 8 smaller reactors and an emergency battery bank that could keep critical systems running for 72 hours, even if everything else failed. The armor was made of composite layers. There was titanium tungsten alloy, ceramic ablative plating, and electromagnetic reactive plates all working together. The total thickness ranged from 8 to 15 meters depending on what part of the ship you looked at. The ship had compartments that could seal themselves automatically in under 3 seconds if the hull was breached. The shields were another shocking feature. Humanity had only developed practical energy shielding 12 years ago, but they had clearly put massive resources into making it better. The Warhammer's shield generators could create a defensive field strong enough to absorb energy equal to multiple nuclear explosions hitting it at once. The weapons section of the report made several analysts choke on their drinks. Primary weapons included 84 heavy railgun turrets. Each one could accelerate slugs made of tungsten and depleted uranium to 3% of light speed. The kinetic energy from just one slug hitting a target would be the same as a small asteroid crashing into something. Secondary weapons consisted of 216 missile tubes. They carried a mix of nuclear-tipped missiles, kinetic kill missiles, and electronic warfare missiles. Total payload was over 4,000 missiles ready to launch. Tertiary weapons included 640-point defense laser clusters. These were designed to intercept incoming projectiles, missiles, and small attack craft before they could get close to the ship. Then there was the spinal weapon. The magnetic acceleration cannon that ran the entire length of the ship could fire a projectile weighing 10,000 tons at 5% of light speed. Drevkin did the math 3 times because he was certain he made a mistake. He had not made any mistake. The weapon could theoretically crack open a planet's outer shell and damage the mantle beneath. Council member Zareth declared loudly that this could not be accurate. His tentacles were writhing around, showing his distress. He said no species could build such a vessel. Just the resources needed would bankrupt an entire civilization. Admiral Patterson spoke for the first time since arriving. His voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded ships in real combat situations. He said the Warhammer's construction took 6 years. It required the combined resources of 12 orbital shipyards all working together in coordination. The total cost was approximately 800 billion credits when converted to council currency. Zareth repeated the number faintly. 800 billion. He said that was more than their entire military budget for 10 years. Patterson said simply that they found it necessary to spend that much. Chairman Vexthora was studying the human delegation with completely new eyes now. These were not eager newcomers looking for council approval and protection. These were veterans of something the council had not experienced in thousands of years. These were veterans of real total warfare. The chairman asked Admiral Patterson politely if he could explain what threat prompted humanity to build such vessels. Patterson's expression became darker and more serious. He said they did not build the Titan class because of any external threat from aliens. They built them because of themselves. Because of other humans. The observation deck fell silent once again. Patterson continued speaking. He said humanity had known conflict for their entire existence as a species. Wars shaped their history, their culture, and pushed their technology forward. 30 years ago, they almost destroyed themselves in what they called the resource wars. Conventional weapons and nuclear weapons devastated 3 continents on Earth. They lost 1.2 billion people in just 8 years of fighting. Several council members made sounds of horror. The galaxy had not seen war on that scale in thousands of years. It was almost unthinkable. Patterson kept talking. He said when they finally achieved peace and unified under a single planetary government, humanity made a decision together. Never again would they be vulnerable. Never again would they be weak. If peace was what they truly wanted, then they had to be strong enough that nobody would dare threaten it. Drevkin said quietly that they built warships capable of conquering the entire galaxy. Captain Bennett interrupted and corrected him. She said no. They built warships that could defend humanity against anything that might threaten them. There was a difference between conquest and defense. Humanity did not seek to conquer others. They sought security and safety for their own people. Chairman Vexuthora asked carefully what would happen if the council denied their membership application. Ambassador Martinez stepped forward to answer. She said then humanity would respectfully maintain peaceful relations through trade and diplomatic channels with any species that wanted such relations, but they would not disarm their military. That was not something they would negotiate about. That was absolutely final. The chairman looked out at the warhammer still hanging in space like a sleeping god of destruction. He thought about the council's proud fleet with their ships designed for peacekeeping and patrol duties. He thought about what would happen if humanity ever decided that peace was no longer in their best interest. He thought about what 8 of these massive warships could do if they were ever used in anger. Vexuthora said slowly that he believed they should continue with the demonstration. He asked Captain Bennett if she would be willing to show them what the vessel could actually do in action. Bennett smiled, and this time there was no mistaking the satisfaction on her face. She said it would be their pleasure to demonstrate for the chairman and the council. The observation deck's atmosphere changed in that moment. What had been curiosity mixed with shock now became curiosity mixed with genuine dread. They were about to see what humanity considered acceptable military force. They were about to learn what happens when a species builds weapons based on lessons learned from nearly destroying themselves. The demonstration was about to begin, and nobody knew if they were ready to see it.